I'm Dr. John Gartner.
And I'm Dr. Harry Segal.
Welcome to a special session of Shrinking Trump, the debate version.
Our show began more than 2 months ago because we had noticed as clinical psychologists that the media was ignoring what seemed to us to be signs of Trump's early signs of dementia in Trump's behavior, in his language, even in his physical bearing. And we began the show to really talk about that and to contrast his cognitive functioning with what we thought was Biden's normal aging behavior, is what John referred to as the aging brain versus the dementing brain. And our goal is really to raise clinical awareness and sophistication on the part of our viewers, but also of the media. And that's really what's most important to us. And in fact, as clinical psychologists, we're trained to think about what our patients say, how they describe their life as data, and that our understanding of them changes and evolves as new information comes in. So that clinical work is really a series of progressive hypotheses which can change over time. Last night, the debate performance by both of these men, but particularly Joe Biden's performance, which was, I would argue, not just a lackluster or poor performance, but really a kind of revelation that has sent shockwaves through the public and to the political class and to the media. And so we're going to talk about that today. So I actually want to start, since this is affecting people, to ask you, John, what was this like for you?
Well, I think that it really did remind me of the night that Trump was elected. You know, there was that sense of utter shock, this feeling that when the debate, first of all, let me just say, I think it was a catastrophic performance. I think it was the worst presidential debate performance in the history of presidential debates. And I'm actually old enough that I actually was in Douglas debate. I know I look younger than my age, but no, I mean, but you and I have seen every debate since Nixon and Kennedy.
And Biden was there. He was pointing out what was going on with Lincoln. Is that
right? That's right. Yeah, Biden was sitting next to me. So this is, and just at the moment, really, in American history, where it never actually mattered more, we actually got the worst debate performance in history. So, you know, at first I felt like the walls were closing in, and I'll tell you when we go through it in more detail, exactly at the moment where I felt the floor actually fall beneath me and felt like I was falling into a pit or into the darkness, into the void. And I have a feeling that a lot of you are feeling the same way. You know, after the debate, the one thing that, some of the commentators looked like their mothers had died. And they were saying that, look, during the debate, I've been getting hundreds of texts of people. The main word that people were using was panic.
Yes.
People were panicking. And then there was a sudden movement to dump. I mean, imagine after a debate, there being a sudden movement to dump one of the presidential candidates. That's never happened before. So it was really, as far as a performance and as far as the political impact, I would say it couldn't have been worse. It was absolutely the worst case scenario. In terms of understanding what happened, I think we are actually going to have a very interesting discussion today because it's actually quite complex. I think there were a lot of things that were going on. And so it would be too easy to only look at some of the factors and not look at all of the factors.
And also including, of course, looking at Trump's performance, who he was in fine shape. I have been predicting he'd have trouble at night. He did not. Of course, he didn't get any real pushback from Biden whatsoever. So there was no way to see what would he have been like if he had been really provoked. But let me say something about John's experience of falling through the floor, and also the commentators using the term panic. And that brings me to I've said this before on this show, that Americans are fascinated with mental health and clinical phenomena, but they don't understand them. So there's the fad of everyone having ADD for a while, or everyone's on the spectrum, everyone has borderline personality disorder. The other term that people use now constantly is the word trauma and traumatic. And they use this term sometimes just to mean they had a hard time. Like, third grade was traumatizing for me. Or I went to a party and it was just traumatizing. I really want to take this moment to present a way of thinking about what trauma is, truly. Trauma is the experience that happens to someone's mind and their subjective experience when a reality that they have counted on so intensely that they don't even think about it is suddenly turned upside down. So think of 9/11, the day before and the day after. There was that sense that Americans had that they were safe until that day, and then the towers fell, we were attacked, and suddenly no one felt safe. And in fact, the country was traumatized to the point where we started 2 wars. The second, a complete disaster, but they're both disasters. Another example would be a child who, say, loves his dad, and one day his dad is drunk and beats up his mom in front of him. That's a trauma. A child who trusts an adult figure who suddenly becomes a predator, that creates a traumatic experience because the child relies on the father or mother or the adult figure who's now dangerous. It changes their world completely. And it puts people into shock. That's how the mind, the brain, and therefore the mental experience generated by the brain, that's how we respond. So what I felt like afterwards was I felt that I just experienced a trauma. It's like my whole world had changed. I had been talking on this show with my friends. I supported Joe Biden because I thought he's a talented politician. I followed him since 1988. I thought he did reasonably well 4 years ago in his debate with Trump. I thought he's done a very good job as president. People have been saying that he's very good in meetings. He flew to Israel and all this. And yet, look what showed up. This was not normal functioning. This is not someone who's, in his 80s, a little slow, but able to really nail things. I know many, many people in their 80s who can do that. This was not that. This was terrifying and traumatizing. I'm sorry. Go ahead, John.
It was traumatizing. I think I've shared with you that I have this weird fascination with zombie movies. Just to let you even deeper into my twisted psyche, one of my recurrent nightmares that I've had since I was a child is I was playing in the play park, and then my friend turns into a monster, and I panic, and I go to their mother for help. Your child's turned into a monster, and then she turns into a monster, and then I keep coming to people for help who should be safe people, and they turn into monsters. Then finally, in a hysterical mess, I come to my mother crying hysterically, throwing myself into her arms, going, help, everyone's turning into a monster. And then she turns into a monster. I'm not saying that Biden is a monster, but what I'm saying is what you're talking about. We have these institutions that we counted on, right? The intelligence community is supposed to keep us safe from Russia, but they didn't. In fact, they seem to be helping Russia. The Justice Department is supposed to stop people, right, who were trying to destroy the government or break laws or destroy the Constitution, but they failed, right? Merrick Garland let this case go too long. We rely on the press as an institution, right, to tell us the truth, but they've been kind of co-opted. And so finally, this was like the last one we were coming to, like at least the last ditch is the election, right? So every other institution has failed, but now at least Uncle Joe is going to get out there and whip Trump's butt and save us. And then he collapsed, and it was like, there's nobody. And I think that really was such a feeling of vulnerability and trauma. I really do believe people, you're right, Harry. I'm glad you're speaking to that, because I think there's a lot of people right now who are listening who may feel very heard by what you were saying.
And John, you have to reassure our audience that in your analysis, you were able to come and understand that you were projecting your rage onto those figures in the dream, because you've worked out all those issues by now.
Well, Harry, I don't know if you've noticed, but the zombies are back. It's a new season of Walking Dead. Anyway, you have some clips you want to take us through, don't you? Have some clips?
Well, yes. I listen. When I was watching the debate last night, after 2 minutes, I texted John to say, "Oh my God, it's all over." And I saw a number of patients today who came in and just began talking about the debate because they were feeling so traumatized. And many of them said, "Oh my God, the first 5 minutes." And Biden does recover a bit toward the end, but way down. By 45 minutes, he's doing a little bit better. So let's take a look at their opening answers to questions, the same question, and the way it works is that I felt, I should say before we start, I'm sorry, that after watching it and discussing things with John, I then stayed up till 3 a.m. watching it again, and looking for clips and thinking about it, and sometimes even reading a transcript. And my note on this was that Biden's first answer sounds worse than it is, and Trump's first answer actually sounds better than it is.
Gentlemen, thanks so much for being here. Let's begin the debate, and let's start with the issue that voters consistently say is their top concern, the economy. President Biden, inflation has slowed, but prices remain high. Since you took office, the price of essentials has increased. For example, a basket of groceries that cost $100 then now costs more than $120. And typical home prices have jumped more than 30%. What do you say to voters who feel they are worse off under your presidency than they were under President Trump?
We got to take a look at what I was left when I became president, what Mr. Trump left me. We had an economy that was in free fall. The pandemic was so badly handled. Many people were dying. All he said was, "It's not that serious. Just inject a little bleach in your arm. You'll be all right." The economy collapsed. There were no jobs. Unemployment rate rose to 15%. It was terrible. And so what we had to do is try to put things back together again. And that's exactly what we began to do. We created 15,000 new jobs. We brought out the position where we have 800,000 new manufacturing jobs. But there's more to be done. There's more to be done. Working class people are still in trouble. I come from Scranton, Pennsylvania. I come of a household where the kitchen table, if the things weren't able to be met during the month, it was a problem. Price of eggs, the price of gas, the price of housing, the price of a whole range of things. That's why I'm working so hard to make sure I deal with those problems. And we're going to make sure that we reduce the price of housing. We're going to make sure we build 2 million new units. We're going to make sure we cap rents so corporate greed can't take over. The combination, what I was left with in corporate greed, is the reason why we're in this problem right now. In addition to that, we're in a situation where if you take a look at all that was done in his administration, he didn't do much at all. By the time he left, things were in chaos, literally chaos. And so we put things back together. We created, I said, those jobs. We make sure we had a situation where we brought down the price of prescription drugs, which is a major issue for many people, to $15 for a insulin shot as opposed to $400. No senior has to pay more than $200 for any drug, all the drugs they can include beginning next year. And the situation is and we're going to make that available to everybody, to all Americans. So we're working to bring down the price around the kitchen table, and that's what we're going to get done.
He's going to bring down prices around the kitchen table. And John, of course, this is the first appearance of the reduced insulin price that he brings out in an equally mangled way throughout the debate and in his closing statement. He thought,
it's interesting. You said it actually, when you hear it the second time, it's actually better because he really speaks to some actual history of the economy and some actual good points. I think one of the things that shocked us right away is how, and this does relate to normal signs of aging, but advanced aging, how quiet his voice was, how raspy it was, how he coughed several times and had to start again. He was also, and this was out throughout the debate, a terrible, terrible mistake. I really do attribute this to bad coaching. He spoke very quickly during the whole debate. If you have articulation problems, you should do the opposite. You should speak slowly and give yourself a chance to take a breath and enunciate and know what you're going to say and say it with confidence or affect to deliver it. Instead, he was rushed and kept running through all of these things. Number one, number two, number three. And he also delivered it without much affect. So you didn't even know which one was most important of number 1, 2, and 3. And it would have been fine to say, look, first of all, blah, blah, blah. But what really gets my goat is, and then to launch into something that had some affective power. So there was this weird way in which it seemed like they prepared him by having him memorize these long lists of policies, which he then sort of tried to read and stumbled through. And you mentioned the kitchen table issue. It's actually worse because you mentioned the end of his mangling the kitchen table. He said, I come from Scranton, Pennsylvania. I come of a household where the kitchen table, if things weren't to be met by the end of the month, it was a problem.
Exactly.
So he was, and that's when you really start to go. At first, it's like, oh, he's slow, he's soft. And then he mangles the sentence and you go, oh, shit, this is not making sense. But one thing I did notice is during almost all of these mangled moments that we're going to go through, he does show some tells of his stutter. One of his tells is he closes his eyes while he's talking. Like he's still looking at you, but he closes his eyes. It's like the circuits are getting kind of jammed. I didn't see it exactly when he was talking about the kitchen table, but when he starts to talk about insulin, he's having trouble saying the word insulin, he closes his eyes again. And then he does get the word insulin out. I just want people to notice as we're going through these tapes, how often his eyes are closing. And then he does something that I think he's learned to do as a stutterer, which is to escape the sentence that he can't say and get to look, folks, here's the deal. Here's the bottom line. And let's start over again and get to the point. When he does that here, it looks like he's, disoriented. Or he can't keep the concept straight.
Absolutely. But remember, he's been doing this for years. And I saw him do this in 2020 and also in 2012. He gave a fantastic debate performance with Paul Ryan. But the fact is, yes, he's been managing these things. But when you get older, and if your brain is starting to decline, then it's harder to do those kinds of things. That's
what I think. Right. He's having more difficulty compensating for the speech deficit. But unfortunately, that makes him look more impaired than he really is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I hear you.
We're trying to tease apart what the different levels of impairment are. So it may be he has the pre-existing illness of the stutter, but now as he's aging, his stutter gets worse.
Yeah. And if you look at what he actually said, he's not being incomprehensible at all. He's making real points, but he doesn't have the flexibility, the timing, the awareness of the audience in order to really tell a story, which is what a politician always has to do. Chip, let's go on to Trump's first answer.
Thank you. President Trump?
We have the greatest economy in the history of our country. We have never done so well. Everybody was amazed by it. Other countries were copying us. We got hit with COVID. And when we did, we spent the money necessary so we wouldn't end up in a Great Depression, the likes of which we had in 1929. By the time we finished, so we did a great job. We got a lot of credit for the economy, a lot of credit for the military, and no wars and so many other things. Everything was rocking good. But the thing we never got the credit for, and we should have, is getting us out of that COVID mess. He created mandates that was a disaster for our country. But other than that, we had given them back a country where the stock market actually was higher than pre-COVID, and nobody thought that was even possible. The only jobs he created are for illegal immigrants and bounce back jobs, a bounce back from the COVID. He has not done a good job. He's done a poor job, and inflation's killing our country. It is absolutely killing us.
He's stringing together his slogans. We've been watching him do this in rallies. He gums them together. But through the forcefulness of his tone and his ability to create rhythm in his speech, it seems to make sense in a cohesive, coherent way. It actually really doesn't. And this is not because I think this is a way that Trump is managing his own decline, which is not being expressed through a weakness in his voice, but is expressed in other ways. It's not a bad answer if you don't listen to it too closely.
Well, and the other thing that's interesting is basically, if anyone in the audience has ever played sports, you're familiar with that term, playing within yourself, right? If you're playing tennis and you try to whack it all the way to the end of the court, but you're just not that good. You're just going to hit it out, right? You're not good enough to hit that shot. So what you learn is, all right, I'm going to hit an easier to return shot. It's going to be softer, but at least it'll be in the court, because that's the best I can do. That's within my limitations. But I'll do better than that than trying to play above myself. Well, basically, Trump is playing within himself. Okay. Everything he says is basically got one of three stems. Okay. It's like Mad Lib's Trump speech. I was the best. Okay. We had the best economy. We had the best this. We were the most this. We were this. Okay. Biden is the worst. He's been the worst president. He's had the worst economy. Inflation's at 9,000%. Every job has gone to an illegal immigrant. But the point is, Biden bad. And then the third stem is immigrants are destroying the country, right? So that basically, Biden's letting the immigrants destroy the country, and so whatever the topic is, the topic could be, childcare. With the childcare, immigrants are destroying childcare. Yeah.
Absolutely. And we're going to see later on that when the questions get harder in the second half of the debate, he merely just ignores it and says, well, it's because the opioid addiction is because immigrants are coming in 18, 19 million. They're raping and killing people. They're destroying the country. It's his fault.
Right.
And he says it every time. It sounds good. Well, it doesn't sound good, but it sounds cohesive or coherent, but it actually
sounds like a message.
It's a message. Well put.
The idea that he did something that was significant in the military. When he was president, they were still killing people in Afghanistan. He didn't do anything about that. When he was president, we were still found ourselves in a position where you had a notion that we were this safe country. The truth is, I'm the only president this century that doesn't have this decade, that doesn't have any troops dying anywhere in the world like he did.
Not this decade, this century is what he meant. But go ahead.
And he changed it, or he went back and forth. So, and this happens a lot. A million, billion. There's about half a dozen of those. But also his sentence about, and everybody felt like it was a safe country. I don't know what he meant by he thought it was a safe country. That part just really did not. It didn't seem to make sense, I guess. The other thing is, why is he bringing up Afghanistan? It's actually his weakest. When I was president, when he was president, the war in Afghanistan was still going on. You know what? The war was still going on when you were vice president. Okay, it went on for Obama's entire 8 years. I'm not sure you're bragging about, and also your exit from Afghanistan was awkward at best. So why of all the issues that we could say about national security, why are we bragging about the fact that there's no wars on his watch? Anyway, I just think the other thing I want people to look at, by the way, I meant to mention this about the previous tape. You might notice that Biden was looking down a lot of the time that Trump was talking. One of the things, and this is again where I blame Biden's debate coaches, you know that you're on camera, right? Even when your mic is cut. Okay. So if you're on camera, you shouldn't have your mouth open. Your mouth shouldn't be gaping open. You shouldn't be looking into space like you look confused or disoriented, nor should you be looking down. This is a basic sort of TV 101. The first time I was ever on television, Harry, I was on the Lawrence O'Donnell show. And of course, everybody was watching. I had everybody watching, and my wife was watching it. And I was so nervous. I'd rehearsed what I was going to say 100 times, but I was so nervous that when they called on me, I looked down on my notes. So the camera turns to me and I go, and Nancy, my wife, said, I thought you were having a stroke. Like she was really worried that I was having a medical event. But, okay, I learned, don't do that. Even if you think you don't remember what just don't look at your notes when you're on camera like that. But I mean, he was looking down. And the other thing that he did apparently was he had a choice. He won the coin toss. He could put it on the right side or the left side. A lot of the times when he's looking down, it's because he's looking at the moderators. But because he's on one side, it looks like he's just looking down. If he'd switched sides, it wouldn't have looked that apparent, apparently, was one of the people commented. But so I think the body language there, even when he's off camera, is extremely significant. So when we show these clips, pay attention to that. Anyway, you had another thing. Do you want to say something else about that, or do you want to go to the next clip?
No, I this is re-traumatizing. Let's just go through
Re-traumatizing you. Yes, I understand.
All right.
President Trump, we will get to immigration later in this block. President Biden, I want to give you an opportunity to respond to this question about the national debt.
He had the largest national debt of any president in a 4-year period, number one. Number two, that $2 trillion tax cut benefited the very wealthy. What I'm going to do is fix the tax system. For example, we have 1,000 billionaires in America. And what's happening? They're in a situation where they, in fact, pay 8.2% in taxes. If they just paid 24%, 25%, either one of those numbers, they'd raise $500 billion, I should say, in a 10-year period. We'd be able to wipe out his debt. We'd be able to help make sure that all those things we need to do, child care, elder care, making sure that we continue to strengthen our healthcare system, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID. With dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump.
Oh my God.
So I want to say something about that moment. So first of all, I want you to know he was stuttering. First of all, he starts with two policies that make total sense, right? So he's just in his dry, boring Democrat way. Number one, policy number one. Number two, policy number three. Okay, so and then he gets into the COVID, and then he can't. I don't know exactly what thought he was trying to complete, but it's clear his voice is halting. He's stalling. He's trying to say something, right? And so he does what a stutterer does. He tries and he kind of fails at it. He doesn't give up right away, but then he bails. And so then he goes to, well, we beat Medicare. And they say, well, thank you very much, President Biden. And they cut up his mic.
He does. But before that, he got lost. He got lost between, he did not know what he was talking about for a moment. It wasn't just the stammer. You could see it. Excruciating.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Okay. I mean, I said billion and then million, but I'm not clear if he got lost in the thought or it's actually hard to tell. We don't almost have to look at the tape a few more times, but whether he is trying to say something. There are some words that he's trying to formulate that he can't say.
I'm glad he's trying to say something. No, I'm sorry. I just found it so painful to watch. He gets lost.
It's so painful. First of all, whatever the explanation is, okay, the appearance is more important politically. Okay. But I do think it's important to try to tease these things apart. And so if you literally see someone as psychologists, right, when we do differential diagnosis, one of the things we look at is if we already know someone, and medical doctors do this too. If you already know someone has disorder A, right, and they're showing symptoms that could be explained by disorder A, our first, it's not for sure, but our sort of default assumption is that it's probably related to that disease A. So even though he looks like he's not following his own story, the fact that he is trying to say something and is glitching, he's stuttering in front of us is what I'm saying. And then what happens is, I think when he jumped, right, because he's talking about the deficit, right, he's trying to say, and then we got Medicare under control because Medicare is one of the biggest contributors to the deficit. Right. But instead, he says, instead of saying, look, we killed the Medicaid deficit or we got Medicaid, and really just said, well, we killed Medicaid. And then they cut off his mic so he can't even go. I mean, the Medicaid spending, So in order for him to actually, so it just was completely crazy. I killed Medicare.
The reason why I would add disorder B to disorder A is because I watched him debate 4 years ago and he always stammers or stutters a bit. He never has these. Never seen him do that before, ever.
I think this is the worst I've ever seen him stutter in public.
Well, I think there's been a deterioration. There's been another process.
That may be.
Let's keep going because we have a lot of tape to go through, and we have a wonderful guest today. So let's go on. Go ahead, Chip, for number 5.
Well, he's right. He did beat Medicare. He beat it to death, and he's destroying Medicare. because all of these people are coming in. They're putting them on Medicare. They're putting them on Social Security. They're going to destroy Social Security. This man is going to single-handedly destroy Social Security.
That's 12 minutes in. This is what he says throughout the debate. That's exactly the formula. It's a formula, and it keeps Trump structured, because all he has to do is repeat this anytime he's challenged. And even there, he killed Medicaid. He didn't mention Medicaid.
Right.
And
of course, again, it's all about the immigrants. The immigrants are killing it.
That's all it is, right? Let's do a little bit more Trump.
But before you say that, though, one more thing I want to say is Trump, in several points in this debate, do the things that I advised Biden to do.
Yeah.
Okay, because Trump picked up on the fact that he made a mistake. He obviously didn't mean he killed Medicare. He didn't have a chance to explain, but he said, yeah, he did kill Medicare. Yeah. So, fair play to him, right? When he saw a mistake, he capitalized on it. And this happens several times.
The problem they have is they're radical, because they will take the life of a child in the 8th month, the 9th month, and even after birth. After birth, if you look at the former governor of Virginia, he was willing to do this. He said, we'll put the baby aside and we'll determine what we do with the baby, meaning we'll kill the baby. What happened is we brought it back to the states, and the country is now coming together on this issue. It's been a great thing.
Unbelievable. But in Democrat states, they take the baby and they smash its head against a rock, like the Pharaoh used to do with the Jews, but only in Democratic.
Yeah, only. That's right. All those Jewish Democrats who want to cut babies in half, like Solomon. No, it's really he's been pushing this. It's a wonderful way that he's been trying to gloss over the ending Roe v. Wade, which has really angered so many women, including Republican suburban women. And he's been working on this. We've been watching him do this on the stump. It's not hard to knock that down. I'm not a politician, and I could accept.
I think for me, the moment when the floor dropped out is it? There's no better softball question for Joe Biden than Roe v. Wade. I mean, the thing that has kept my wife from having a nervous breakdown is that she says, look, we're going to win in November because of Roe. It's Roe-vember. I don't care what the polls say. The women are coming out. They're going to. So this is the Trump killer issue, right? So let's see what he does with it.
It's been a terrible thing, what you've done. The fact is that the vast majority of constitutional scholars supported Roe when it was decided. Supported Roe. And that's this idea that they're all against it is just ridiculous. And this is the guy who says the state should be able to have it. We're in a state where in 6 weeks, you don't even know whether you're pregnant or not, but you cannot see a doctor and have him decide on what your circumstances are, whether you need help. The idea that states are able to do this is a little like saying we're going to turn civil rights back to the states, let each state have a different rule. Look, there's so many young women who have been, including a young woman who just was murdered, and he went to the funeral. The idea that she was murdered by an immigrant coming in, they talk about that. But here's the deal: there's a lot of young women who are being raped by their in-laws, by their spouses, brothers and sisters, it's just ridiculous, and they can do nothing about it. And they try to arrest them when they cross state lines.
Thank you.
There's a lot of things off about that answer, but at one point he really does go off the rails, because he actually skips like a record player. He skips out of the groove they're in, which is abortion, and he starts talking about immigration. That Trump went to the funeral of someone who was murdered by an immigrant, of course, to demonize immigrants because they're all murderers in his book. And of course, that's disgusting. But we're talking about abortion, okay? His main issue, his most powerful issue, and he gets derailed to talk about immigration. Yeah.
If Trump had done that, you and I would be talking about dementia. We would be.
Well, no, if Trump had done it, we'd go, he turns every issue into talking about immigration. So it's
no. If Trump had jumped from one topic to another, confused them, and tried to find his way back, including, sisters raping people, which is sort of, it was just, we would be saying, here's more evidence of dementia done. That's what we would be saying. again, not that we've ever formally or officially diagnosed Trump. We were just arguing for cognitive decline because we see evidence of it at times.
Yeah.
This is evidence.
I agree with you. Of all the things that we're going through today, to me, this was the one that was the clearest. Like, no, there isn't another explanation, for that other than cognitive decline. So that's the first sign that I really saw, and maybe the only one for sure in this debate where you can say, no, that's the only explanation, So it was only one moment, but that was the moment 15 minutes in when I already felt like we're losing. And then, okay, finally, here's our secret weapon. And it's like, holy, fuck. What the?
No. This is like, I remember I had I have a wonderful friend, but he was a very studious kid in a family of athletes. And he was reading James Joyce when he was 11, but he also said he would strike out at T-ball. Like the ball is sitting there and he would miss and strike out. And Biden, you're right. It wasn't even a softball question. It was Joe Scarborough talked about him missing layup after layup after
Actually,
layup.
I think that's a good metaphor. I'm glad you brought that up because I was thinking what he missed there was a slam dunk. It wasn't even a layup. It wasn't even a dunk, Harry. It was a slam dunk. It was like where you go, woof, you know what I mean? And you hold on to the rim, right? And you kind of do it like a woo, you know what I mean? You slam it.
Yeah. All right. Can we go on?
Please.
4-star general standing to your side who was on your staff who said you said it, period. That's number one. And number two, the idea that I have to apologize to you for anything along the line. We've done more for veterans than any president has in American history. And they now are in their family. The only sacred obligation we have as a country is to care for our veterans when they come home and their families and equip them when they go to war. That's what we're doing. That's what the VA is doing now. They're doing more for veterans than ever before in our history.
I'm sorry, I should have set that up.
Okay.
Trump was quoted by General Kelly in a book in the Atlantic, saying that Trump had called dead soldiers suckers and losers or something like that, and then he accused Biden of saying it, and then wanted him to apologize, and that was Biden's response, which I thought that was stronger. It was
yes. Well, finally, you're showing some life. A sign of life. Proof of life. He really had to finally we see some affect, get mad, get something. I think there were two ways in which I think he failed us in the affect department. And by the way, I also want to point out he repeated American twice. There's a number of places where he keeps repeating the same word for no reason. I just want to point that out because that's a cognitive-y kind of thing. But one of the things that's lacking here is affect on two levels. One, he's not getting mad enough at Trump, right? And secondly, what he really needed to do was, instead of going over all these small bore issues, and yes, we're going to talk about the price of insulin, not once more, but twice more, including in his closing statements. Okay. Instead of trying to go through all these small bore policy issues that he mangled grammatically, why not talk about the big picture? Why not say, look, this is about the soul of America, folks. America is a good country. You know what I mean? But this guy's saying he'll be a dictator on day one. And I believe him. So what kind of a country do we want to have? Start arousing people's emotions around their love of country and around how despicable he is. But he speaks in this monotone almost all the time. You have to go through all the tape to find that one place where he gets a little rise out of him.
Exactly. Here's a very weak attempt that Biden has to attack Trump's amoral behavior.
The idea that I did anything wrong relative to what you're talking about is outrageous. It's simply a lie, number one. Number two, the idea that you have a right to seek retribution against any American just because you're president is wrong. It's simply wrong. No president's ever spoken like that before. No president in our history has spoken like that before. Number three, the crimes that you are still charged with, and think of all the civil penalties you have. How many billions of dollars do you owe in civil penalties for molesting a woman in public, for doing a whole range of things, of having sex with a porn star on the night while your wife was pregnant? I mean, what are you talking about? You have the morals of an alley cat.
It actually was pretty good. I mean, I think he did finally he landed a blow. It was a weak blow, but it was a blow. And he should have been raining blows on him like that. Okay, I don't mind the fact that he uses old man words like you've got the morals of an alley cat, or he says malarkey. I happen to find those old, languagisms charming personally. But so that one wasn't so bad. It's just if it had been stronger and if he had kept doing it, I think that would have helped him.
It's true. And it just makes me think of Top Cat, which was one of my favorite shows when I was growing up. Can we go on to number 10, Chip?
I'm the one that got the insulin down for the seniors. I took care of the seniors. What he's doing is destroying all of our medical programs because the migrants coming in, they want everybody. And look, I have the biggest heart on the stage. I guarantee you that. And I want to take care of people. But we're destroying our country. They're taking over our schools, our hospitals, and they're going to be taking over Social Security. He is destroying Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid.
Again, the immigrants, it's only the immigrants that are causing this.
Right.
Real demagogue move here.
Yeah.
And also,
so basically, this is Hitler running on the Jewish problem.
Absolutely.
He's running on the immigrant problem. Just so you know.
Just so you know. Let's see this next one. This is where Trump turns his own weakness, which is he's a pathological liar, and accuses Biden of it.
So I've dealt with politicians all my life. I've been on this side of the equation for the last 8 years. I've never seen anybody lie like this guy. He lies. I've never seen it. He could look you in the face. About so many other things, too. And we mentioned the laptop. We mentioned Russia, Ukraine. Everything he does is a lie. It's misinformation and disinformation. The losers and suckers story that he made up is a total lie on the military. It's a disgrace. But Social Security, he's destroying it because millions of people are pouring into our country, and they're putting them onto Social Security. They're putting them onto Medicare, Medicaid. They're putting them in our hospitals. They're taking the place of our citizens. What they're doing to the VA, to our veterans, is unbelievable. Our veterans are living in the street, and these people are living in luxury hotels. He doesn't know what he's doing, and it's really coming back. I've never seen such anger in our country before.
These are the words of a fascist. Simply put, this is a fascist completely making up stuff about an outgroup that he's demonizing. And he's using it to get his way back into power.
Once again, Trump has taken our debate advice that we were offering to Biden. Okay, that Biden was the one who instead, I was on a podcast with Stuart Stevens, who actually prepared Romney for the debates. And he said, one of the things you have to do is have 2 or 3 things and make those points over and over again. This is the one thing you have to not do that candidates are tempted to do, is to go back downstream and correct something in the record that their opponent said that was inaccurate. It's already done. It's gone. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the things that Biden wasted his time on. That's not true. We raised that by 7% and blah, blah, and no one's listening. Okay. What he needed to do was frame the big picture. The line I thought he should have said, man, the crap that comes out of your mouth, it's like a diarrhea of lies. Mm-hmm. Okay. Basically, now we have the image of a gigantic geyser of shit coming out of his mouth. Okay. Okay. No, I want you to visualize this because this is the point. What's the comeback to that? You know what I mean? Oh, no, you're diarrhea. You're a liar. We've already created the image that he's a fire hose of lies, right? We're not going to go enumerate them. We're not going to alphabetize them. Okay. There's 35,000 of them, for God's sake. But the point is, label him as a liar. And that's what Trump did. Oh, he's a liar. It's disinformation. He's misinformation. He did exactly to Biden what Biden should have done to Trump.
And Trump always projects and attacks his opponents for things that he himself is doing.
We now have the largest deficit in the history of our country under this guy. We have the largest deficit with China. He gets paid by China. He's a Manchurian candidate. He gets money from China. So I think he's afraid to deal with them or something. But do you notice he never took out my tariffs because we bring in so much money with the tariffs that I imposed on China. He never took them away. He can't because it's too much money.
So Trump's a Manchurian candidate, so he projects that onto Biden, of course.
Exactly.
President Biden, you have 40 seconds left. Would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I would. The idea that somehow we are this failing country. I never heard a president talk like this before. We're the envy of the world. Like, name me a single major country president who wouldn't trade places with the United States of America for all our problems and all our opportunities. We're the most progressive country in the world in getting things done. We're the strongest country in the world. We're a country in the world who keeps our word, and everybody trusts us. All of our allies and those who he cuddles up to, from Kim Jong-un, who he sends love letters to, and Putin, etc. They don't want to screw around with us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Better, well organized,
Yeah.
weekly expressed, but that's a bit better. It's the end of it's an hour and 21 minutes.
I wish he'd done more of that. I wish he'd done more of, John Meacham, who's a very regular in Morning Joe, wrote this book called The Soul of America. And he keeps talking about sort of our better angels versus sort of, I guess, our demons. And John Meacham's an advisor to the Biden campaign. I thought he was going to give a better angels, kind of a speech like, we're Americans, we're better than this. And what kind of America do you want to live in? And keep making a contrast, not between my insulin prices and his insulin prices, but between his dark authoritarian nightmare and democracy.
But John, he has his closing statement of 2 minutes.
Well, that's right. Let's wait. That's right. Hold on. Hold off. Right.
You're jumping the gun here.
Before we pass
you're
judgment.
Jumping the shark here is really what you're doing. Can we go on to one more, please?
Well, I took 2 tests, cognitive tests. I aced them, both of them, as you know. We made it public. He took none. I'd like to see him take one, just one, a real easy one. Like go through the first 5 questions. He couldn't do it. But I took 2 cognitive tests. I took physical exams every year. And, we knock on wood wherever we may have wood, that I'm in very good health. I just won 2 club championships, not even senior, 2 regular club championships. To do that, you have to be quite smart, and you have to be able to hit the ball a long way. And I do it. He doesn't do it. He can't hit a ball 50 yards. He challenged me to a golf match. He can't hit a ball 50 yards. I think I'm in very good shape. I feel that I'm as in good a shape as I was 25, 30 years ago. Actually, I'm probably a little bit lighter, but I'm in as good a shape as I was years ago. I feel very good. I feel the same. But I was willing to take a cognitive test. And you know what? If I didn't do well, I aced them. Dr. Ronnie Jackson, who's a great guy when he was White House doctor. And then I took another one, a similar one. And one of them said they'd never seen anybody ace him.
Thank you. President Biden?
You can see he is 6'5" and only 223 pounds, or 235 pounds. Well, you said 6'4", 200. Well, anyway, that's what anyway, just take a look at what he says he is and take a look at what he is. Look, I'd be happy to have a driving contest with him. The reason I got my handicap, which when I was vice president, down to a 6. But by the way, I told you before, I'm happy to play golf if you carry your own bag. Think you can do it?
That's the biggest lie. He's a 6 handicap of all.
I was an 8 handicap.
Yeah.
8. But I had, how many?
I've seen you swing. I know you swing.
Okay,
let's not act like children.
President Trump, we're going to
21
Let's not act like children.
Why the hell are we talking about golf? Why in the hell are we talking about golf? This was, I tried to signal to the Biden campaign, like blinking my eyes to give them the emergency signal. Jennifer Rubin quoted us in the Washington Post as to debate advice, right? And one of the things, and I hoped that someone in the Biden campaign would read it. I mean, after all, they do read the Washington Post, right? It's not like we're quoted every day. We're not that important, but that day we were. So maybe they might have read it. Okay, it could happen. And one of the things that I said is he has to go on offense on the cognitive issue. Okay, after he talked about bragging the mocha, taking the mocha twice. And by the way, I just have to parenthetically say, you only give someone the mocha if you suspect they have dementia. Okay. Now, the first time he took it was because I organized a group of doctors to create a whole campaign to insist that it be included by Roddy Jackson in his medical physical. And it actually worked. So now I don't know if I'm sorry because he never stops talking about it. But here's the thing. He says he passed it twice. Why did he take it the second time? If you only give someone the test when you suspect they have dementia, I mean, someone thought maybe we should check again because he's kind of showing some signs. So when he's bragging, I've passed the dementia test so many times. So I guess people keep giving it to you because you keep acting demented. So that's just an aside, okay? But what I'm saying here is Biden had a golden opportunity to literally do a reversal. Okay, he's on the defensive on this cognitive issue. What he could have said is, hey, man, look, you don't even know who is president. You don't even know who the president is. You've said 8 times that Obama is president. You're not joking, man. You're confused. You mix up Nikki Haley and Nancy Pelosi. Half the time, people don't even understand what the heck you're talking about. You're talking about sharks and batteries and your old friend Hannibal Lecter and making up quotes from Robert E. Lee. I mean, man, it's just nuts. And I mean, he could have, when you were at the Business Roundtable last week, they came out of there saying you couldn't put one thought together. They said that on Squawk Box. They came in as your supporters and they left saying we can't support this guy. He can't think.
Yeah. It's just one.
It's like my handicap was 8. No, it was. Sure. Yeah, I'll play you. Okay.
Well, 6.
He says when Trump says stop acting like a child, he actually was right. Biden was acting like a child.
He was right. But we have the closing argument where he can quote
John.
It's
not too late.
He can quote John Meacham and he can talk about the better angels of our nature.
Time for the candidates to deliver their closing statements as predetermined by a coin toss. We're going to begin with you, President Biden. You have 2 minutes.
We've made significant progress from the debacle that was left by President Trump in his last term. We find ourselves in a situation where, number one, we have to make sure that we have a fair tax system. I ask anyone out there in the audience or anyone out watching this debate, do you think the tax system is fair? The fact is that I said nobody even making under $400,000 had a single penny increase in their taxes and will not. And if I'm reelected, that'll be the case again. But this guy has increased your taxes because of the deficit, number one. He's increased inflation because of the debacle he left after the way he handled the pandemic. And he finds himself in a position where he now wants to tax you more by putting a 10% tariff on everything that comes into the United States of America. What I did when, for example, he wants to get rid of the ability of Medicare for us to be able to negotiate drug prices with the big pharma companies. Well, guess what? We got it down to $35 for insulin instead of $400. No more than $2,000 for every senior, no matter how much prescription they need. You know what that did? That reduced the federal debt by $160 billion over 10 years because the government doesn't have to pay the exorbitant prices. I'm going to make that available to every senior all along, it's happening now, and everybody in America. He wants to get rid of that. I'm going to make sure that we have child care. We're going to significantly increase the credits that people have for child care. I'm going to make sure we do something about what we're doing on lead pipes and all the things that are causing health problems for people across the country. We're going to continue to fight to bring down inflation and give people a break.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump, you now have...
Well, this is really stirring patriotic stuff, and it's a paraphrase Nathaniel Hale. Give me $35 insulin or give me death. I mean, this is such a small bore issue in what is maybe the most momentous election in our history, and he's missing the moment. Now, by the way, he stuttered about 10 times. I don't know if you know, his little stutters. He shut his eyes twice. So clearly he was having a stuttering night. But even so, what the heck was that message?
How hard is it to memorize a 2-minute closing statement when it's not based on a question? He couldn't even do that.
Well, I think the thing is, look, obviously they knew there was going to be closing statements. And so obviously what he had prepared, the Democrats are addicted to this idea that it's the economy, stupid, and all people care about are kitchen table issues.
Right.
Actually, right now we feel like we're plummeting to our death. Okay, that humanity is about to go extinct. Okay, I really don't give a hoot about that $35 insulin, and nobody does. For God's sake, I mean, wake up and smell the coffee. It was a stupid idea. And by the way, I just want to say, the people that prepared Biden for this debate should be fired and never be allowed to work in politics. It should be a lifetime ban.
Okay, but John, he's done very well when he was younger. He did beautifully with Paul Ryan in 2012. He's failing cognitively. And so we don't know what he prepared. Maybe he forgot it. And then he was standing there thinking about the tax breaks instead of a closing statement. Now, listen, this has been a long...
Maybe not. I'm not sure I'm going to accept what you're saying. I think the thing is that I think because look, he obviously had content that he wanted to deliver. He delivered it, whatever, badly or what have you, but the content wasn't related to the bigger issues of the election. I can't believe that they gave him a whole soul of America speech. He forgot it and decided to talk about insulin. Now that could have happened, but I don't think it did.
I don't know. We'll never know what happened. Maybe someday we'll know, but it's no experienced politician would ever do that.
It was horrible. Horrible.
None. Now, listen, we've gone on a long time. We're going to have an extra long show today because we have a distinguished guest for us to bring in.
Right.
Before I bring in our guest, I just want to tell this very, very brief story. There is a very famous South American writer named Jorge Borges, who was a postmodern writer. He did extraordinary things. And when I was in college, in the 80s at Columbia, we were always waiting for him to get the Nobel Prize for literature. He never got it. But he came to Columbia, to Lowell Library. He was an old man by this point. He was blind. And we all gathered to hear him talk. He read some poems. And someone asked him, what was his great ambition as a writer? And his answer, I'll never forget it because I was there, was that he wanted to add a word to the Spanish language. Well, our guest today is Professor David Dunning, who is currently at the University of Michigan. He was at Cornell for many years. And Dave is one of the rare people on the planet who has added words to the English language. If you've heard of the Dunning-Krueger Effect, a mechanism that Dave discovered in his research in social psychology that showed that people are prone to overestimate their competence at things that they are not competent at. I assured him that we were not asking him to come to apply the Dunning-Krueger effect to Donald Trump, because I happen to know that Dave Dunning is a great observer of politics, of language, of narrative. And let me just briefly say, besides the Dunning-Krueger effect, Dave's work really began with looking at eyewitness testimony and the ways in which testimony could contradict if you had two eyewitnesses. He went on to teach and to write about the intersection of psychology and law. He has more recently been working on a book. I'm not sure if it's finished, Dave. You have to tell me.
We're still working on it. I'm still working on it. Yeah.
Well, I think it's going to be a really phenomenal book on the self in the social context, I'm assuming. And anyway, we're so glad to have you here. So Dave, were you traumatized by last night, or are you doing okay?
I'm doing yes and yes. That is, I think everybody who's involved in politics had a strong reaction last night, whether elation or a trauma, to last night's debate. And I'm okay because I'm old and tired and know that everything is just a pebble dropped in the stream. And the stream moves on, and events will follow that will diminish the impact of this pebble. So I don't get excited too much about anything anymore. I'm too tired.
What do you think this impact will be, though, on the race? What are your thoughts about it?
Well, I actually think that remains to be seen, because there's the event. But I actually think what's more important is the reaction to the event, or by the campaign, by the opposition, by the press, and so forth. So I actually think that there's something to react to, and whether or not the Biden campaign comes back with an effective reaction to it, whether or not the Trump campaign can capitalize on it, whether the press has a narrative or discovers another narrative, or whether people come to some other reaction to it. I mean, a lot of people basically had a traumatic reaction, let's say, or a strong reaction to what Biden did, but Trump did, I think, the best that he could do, but a lot of people didn't go, wow, I want to vote for that guy. So even at his best, Trump was not likable. So there's a lot of the tale that has to be told, for example. Just to give you an idea, I've been playing around with it today. There are a lot of reactions in the press to say, oh, Biden has to drop out. And if I were in the Biden campaign, and I'm not in Biden's campaign, I'm not a Paul, I'm not an expert, so I offer this for entertainment purposes. How I would respond is I would say, well, you think Biden should drop out? Well, let's talk about double standards. I think Republicans then should absolutely demand that Trump drop out, because, gee, you know, he's been convicted 34 times and he's been indicted for stealing government secrets and storing them in Mar-a-Lago. Maybe the Republican Party should have asked him to drop out then. And a jury has determined that he committed sexual assault, and he's been caught on tape trying to alter the election results in Georgia, and on and on. And, you know, there was that time he did that $25 million settlement for defrauding students in Trump University. So, gee, well, if we're going to talk about people don't. So there are a lot of reactions one could have. So I actually think what's more important is not the event itself, but what's about to come. But in the meantime, there are also going to be a lot of distracting events that occur in the next week, the next month, the next 6 months. A week in politics is a lifetime. So I don't know what to think about last night. And by the way, I'm too tired to think about it. So I don't know.
You made one point in an email you sent to Harry that he forwarded to me, that this was a moment in time. And I guess, you know, you're writing a book about the self, and I know all the non-clinical psychologists love to point out there really isn't a self. There's just people behaviors at different points in time, in different contexts, you know, that sort of. Right. So you might have that intellectual perspective, but also I think it's a good temporal perspective. In other words, we really did just see one moment in time. Unfortunately, it was the moment that everybody was paying attention. But interestingly, he can look very different in a different moment. And I'm going to let you introduce it, but I know that you brought a clip.
Well, yeah, and I do want to point this out. I mean, this is part of the reason why I allow myself to be too tired and not to react, because with some distance, things look different. I mean, don't forget, Reagan had a terrible debate along the same lines against, now I'm having a senior moment. Mondale.
You remember he went like, it seemed like
hours. Are you competent to teach? Are you really competent to teach? Because look at what you just did.
Well, if I'm not, according to my own phenomenon, I wouldn't know. And so forth. And Obama famously bombed for the debate before his second term. And but we forget that. So, you know, these moments do come and go. And don't forget, after the State of the Union, everybody was relieved about Biden earlier this year. So it's easy to take single data points too seriously and overreact. Now, we should have the overreaction. It's only natural. We shouldn't deny ourselves these reactions. Yeah. But to remember that things cool down. There'll be other data points that do come. Not to get overexcited in a positive way, not to get overexcited in a negative way. With distance, things will chill out. There was a clip that I did send you of a data point about Biden that came along today. There was a speech he gave at North Carolina, and the clip I sent along was his closing. So if you want to see Biden today as opposed to Biden last night, well, this is Biden today.
I know I'm not a young man. State the obvious. Well, I know. Well, I don't. Folks, I don't walk as easy as I used to. I don't speak as smoothly as I used to. I don't debate as well as I used to. But I know what I do know. I know how to tell the truth. I know right from wrong. And I know how to do this job. I know how to get things done. And I know, like millions of Americans know, when you get knocked down, you get back up. I know what it took to take our economy from the depths of the pandemic to where it is today, the strongest economy in the world. I know what it'll take to bring this economy to everybody. I know what it'll take to rally the world, to stand up against Putin and defend freedom, not yield to him. And I know what it'll take to keep the world safe and free for the years ahead. Folks, I give you my word as a Biden, I would not be running again if I didn't believe with all my heart and soul I can do this job. Because quite frankly, the stakes are too high. The stakes are too high.
Pick yourself up, dust yourself off, start all over again.
Where was that Biden last night? Where was he?
Well, that's what everybody's asking on Twitter, and that's where I found the clip. And so every day is a data point. And I do want to mention that sometimes if data points are games, last night was the NBA Finals. It's an important data point, and that's a regular season data point. So I'm not diminishing the importance of last night of the debate, but there are several months to go, and we don't know what's going to happen. And does the campaign, does the party pick itself up? Does the other party act in an effective way to take advantage of what clearly is a better night for Trump? Because surely the Biden campaign did not expect this to be the headline coming out of that debate, the headline that we're experiencing today. But that's what I'm interested in.
You know, Dave, I really appreciate your Zen-like attitude, not reacting too strongly or too negatively. So I appreciate the spiritual maturity. Also, I really appreciate your bringing that clip today, because I think it brings hope. I had actually assembled all the methods to, for my suicide. I'd gotten all the method, I'd thought through the method. I'd gotten all the materials, I was getting ready. And then I saw your clip and I thought, wait, not yet. We're not dead yet. Because that Biden is someone I would vote for. Here's what I think I take from what aside from hope and cancel and deferring my demise. The other thing that I take from your thing is your tape is we need to do this rally every single day until election day. That's right. Get him out there with people with his sleeves rolled up. We're not dead yet, folks. I would give you my word as a Biden. I'm going to fight and I can do it. Yes, that's what we want. Please. But what they've been doing, because the Biden campaign is incompetent. Yes, I'm talking to you, Ron Klain. Okay. Because they are incompetent. Okay. They've hid him in the Rose Garden, making us think the worst, right? That he must be, blethering or napping or whatever. the debate was the worst format for him, obviously. The best format is when he's engaging with people. Why not have him in a coffee shop every day? I don't care if he stutters, stutter away, but have a cup of coffee with some real people, bond with them so that we can know you're a real person who can do a real job. So the Biden campaign, if they're going to redeem themselves, okay, and I hope you're listening, Biden campaign, if you're listening, okay, just repeat what you did today and just do that every damn day until the election.
I'm going to agree with you because, I think there's a reason why we don't see Biden at press conferences. And the format of question answer is not his format, but being with people is a good format for him. And speeches are a good format for him, for example. There's something else that I would like to emphasize, though it'll go nowhere. And once again, maybe because I'm not an expert, but I'm always a little bit worried about our cultural emphasis on the individual, the hero, the single person. For example, I thoroughly enjoyed the movie Oppenheimer last year, but through it all, I kept thinking, yes, but this was a team effort. But Oppenheimer is the only one remembered or the only one venerated, and poor, Groves from the military. Really, the presidency is about the team you're bringing in. And I think it would be splendid to talk about the team and to have them show up and how wonderful they are, and have a competition of, okay, how does the Democrat team stack up against the Republican team? I would like to see what the teams look like, because they're the ones who are going to be doing everything. But we compare this man to this man currently, and that's it. And I think that's too narrow a focus. I would like to see. That would be more informative to me, and I think more informative to the country.
Interesting. That's the kind of question you would never hear. Can you tell us 5 advisors that you have that you really respect that will be on your team in the White House next year?
Yeah.
Like, that would be a great question, but you're right. It's focused on the hero. And it's maybe that's part of not having a parliamentary system, right? With a prime minister who's really raised by people he's been running with, rather than this strange system that we have.
It's also the risk.
Right. Go ahead.
It's also the risk of our biological evolution, which is, I think, we're programmed to circle around the alpha, because that will keep us safe from the other tribe that wants to kill us. I think what you're talking about is more sophisticated, but I think we're programmed to think that way. What you're talking about is actually a more realistic way of looking at what a president does. It's really a team effort. But I think in terms of presidential politics, we make a very gut decision about who seems stronger, who seems more dominant, who seems more fit. And that's one of the reasons I do fear that this could potentially be a determinative moment.
Well, that's how we do it in our culture. I'm not sure all nations and all cultures do it the same way, but this is the culture that we have. And I submit to you, the proof is in our movies. And you compare our movies to Chinese movies, and you'll see the difference in the way we think about it.
No Marvel movies in China.
Well, I know you do have superhero movies, but watch what the plots are, and the not so subtle.
I will. That's interesting.
Yeah, so you're saying that in some cultures that are, let's say, more collectivist, you're not going to see the individual being privileged as much as we do.
That's right, and you will see more emphasis on development, origin story, which I think is interesting. And sometimes you'll see those elements borrowed into Western movies, and it's interesting when that happens. That Harry and I sometimes we know each other. We can get into tangents on this, but it is an interesting cultural difference in the emphasis.
Yeah, it's the power of culture, and we're standing in a culture, so it's hard for us to be able to see it. It's why I think Mark Twain said that traveling is the best way to get rid of prejudice and bias.
Oh, I think that's right. And though the trick is we only see partially what's going on in other cultures. There's so much we miss because we don't know what's going on.
We can't see it. We're not taught to see it.
Literally.
Yeah. Dave, I'm so glad you came to visit us today, and also that you saved John's life. I think you can put that on your psychological CV, don't you think?
I have to be your servant until I save your life. I hope you realize that.
I will create a psychological chit and never lose it.
Good. Hang on to that, because you could call it at any time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming in. Nice discussion.
Harry. Yeah. Yes. And he is a very famous psychologist. We were very lucky to have him. So Harry, we're up to the shrink wrap section, or were we calling it the shrink weep section this week? Was your depressed idea? What have we learned?
What did we learn today? I think with Dave Dunning's help, with your really, really sharp insights, we're looking at a moment, a very powerful, perhaps determinative moment in a campaign which is the stakes couldn't be higher for our system of government, for our freedom. But I want to emphasize what I began the show with, which is, as Americans, we talk about trauma, but we don't actually think about the experience of it. Mm-hmm. And we're all in shock over seeing a leader who we had come to believe in and rely on, even if you're not a Democrat, and to see any principal player fail in the way that Biden did is really shocking. And there's a way in which I think it's always hard to see anyone fail like that. It's very hard to watch, and I think cringy. And so I think we have to pay attention to how we feel about it. I think Dave Dunning's advice, which is to see this as a moment and to realize that time unfolds. That Trump's that grab women by the tape came out very shortly before the election, and everyone said he was done, and he wasn't. And we'll see what Biden does. But I think from now on, you and I, while watching for Trump's cognitive issues and his personality disorder, at least that we see evidence for, we have to be looking at Biden too, because he showed us that he is not functioning at the same level that he was 4 years ago, at least not in looking at last night.
And even if a lot of these things are related to normal, quote, normal aging, it's normal aging that has had a chance to advance, so he is, like a 3-year-old cheese. He's very aged, the normal aging process has gone on, has developed.
And when people are very old, there can be collapses and changes very quickly. It's not like being 40. If you're in your 80s, your mental capacities can suddenly decline, just as your body can. People can be healthy at 82 and suddenly be in the hospital a week later. So I think it's important for us to watch and think, because our goal is to help all of you to think clinically in a more sophisticated way.
But I do want to say part of thinking of it in a sophisticated way is also parsing apart some of the contributors to this moment, right?
Absolutely.
And I really think the stuttering has been wildly underestimated. I mean, I counted at least 20 places where I saw him stutter. It contributed because he's old and slow and quiet. It just made it even worse. It became a gestalt, right? The whole thing created this impression. We're not parsing it apart in our mind. We're actually getting a gestalt. We're getting an overall perception. That's the way we perceive things. But I think it is important now to analyze it and break it down. Even that moment where he seemed to kind of get lost. I was just on the David. This happens to me all the time now, Harry. Now that I'm not 80, but I'm in my 60s, mid 60s. Okay. This happens to me all the time. And I know I've done it with you. I'm in the middle of telling a story and telling some point. And then I literally stop and go, wait, why was I telling that story? And of course, the person who's listening to me doesn't know why I'm telling that story because I hadn't gotten to the point yet. So then I said, well, what were we talking about before? And I did this on the David Pakman show. Okay. He was asking me a question about the miracle drug that Biden obviously is not taking for his and I got into some kind of ramble, and then I said, "Wait a minute, what was the question? Or what was I talking about?" And he said, "Well, the drug," and you could see he was getting nervous, like I was losing it, like if the interview was going sideways. And then I wrote, "Oh, right, the drug," and then I went on to talk about how the Republican caucus had made up this fake drug, and they said they had medical proof for a fact. And that's the bad news. I'd been introducing the bad news section of our show, and then I didn't remember why I was even talking about the bad news section. So what I'm trying to say is, and I'm still competent to podcast, okay? You're not going to put a younger man in this chair, all right? So my point being is that even though I looked like a doddering, and not as doddering, I looked mildly doddering, not majorly doddering, but even though I was doddering, I still was able to deliver meaningful points, just like now in today's rally, Biden is sounding like Biden again. So I really think those blips, it happened at the worst moment under the Klieg lights. And that's part of what Dave Dunning is saying. It was a moment of time. We can't ignore it. We can't unsee it, but we also could jump to the wrong conclusions.
And clinical psychologists often disagree in nuanced ways. I generally agree with John, but I am very concerned about the sustained inability for him to find his way in a debate at night, which is what I thought was going to happen to Trump, because that really excellent Joe Biden who showed up in that rally, it was 1:00 in the afternoon, and he wasn't under pressure. He was being adored by crowds.
That's why just wheel him out for every early bird special between now and Election Day.
Maybe so. Listen, we have to wrap this up. Thank you so much for coming to our really extended edition of this show. It seemed to John and me that although we aimed for an hour, this was a show that really required some extra time. We always drop the show usually on Fridays, maybe this time on Saturdays. You can find us wherever you find your podcasts, on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and we hope you'll tell your friends and come join us next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.